This is a bedtime story that leads nowhere, and that's okay. A quiet unraveling of thoughts, a dream that forgets its own purpose. Listen, let the words drift past you. They don't need to make sense. They only need to be heard. The man who forgot how to stand still. There was once a man who had forgotten how to stand still. Not because he was in a hurry, not because something was chasing him. He simply forgot. Whenever he tried to stop moving, his body would take another step, or his hands would fidget, or his mind would decide that standing still was just another kind of movement that hadn't happened yet. So he kept walking, through streets that turned into staircases, through staircases that led to fields, through fields that faded into hallways, where doors opened before he could knock and shut behind him, before he could ask why. He didn't know where he was going, but somewhere was always happening, so he didn't have time to wonder. One day, or maybe some other kind of time, he found himself in a city where all the clocks had stopped working. Not broken, not frozen, just undecided. A shopkeeper, whose face flickered between a memory and a whisper, was selling handfuls of unfinished seconds to passers-by. The people would throw them into the air like coins, and time would begin again, just for a moment. Then it would pause again, and again, and again. The man, who had forgotten how to stand still, watched this and thought, maybe that's my problem. Maybe I've just been walking through stop time this whole time. But before he could test his theory, a door appeared in front of him. Not a normal door. This one was painted shut, and the paint was still wet. The door wasn't there a second ago, but now it very much was. Someone on the other side knocked. Knock, knock, knock. The man hesitated. Then, without meaning to, he stepped through the door. The moment he passed through, the world tilted slightly to the left, just enough to make everything feel like it had almost tripped. He was no longer in the city. Now he was inside a house made entirely of exits. There were hallways that led to other hallways, doors that opened to reveal more doors, windows that showed the outside world, but only places he hadn't been yet. The man, who had forgotten how to stand still, kept walking, and the house let him. Every step he took created a new hallway. Every time he turned, a staircase unrolled itself like a tongue, eager to be used. Every time he blinked, the ceiling became the floor, then the walls, then neither. He started to suspect that the house wasn't built to be lived in, only to be moved through. Which was fine. That's what he did. He walked and walked and walked until he came across a door with no handle, and next to it, a chair that looked familiar, a chair that he remembered sitting in once, a long time ago. Before he could question why, the door spoke. "You could sit down, you know," it said. The man, who had forgotten how to stand still, stared at the chair. He considered it. He almost sat down. But before he could, his body took another step. And just like that, the chair was behind him. At some point, which is to say, a point that wasn't quite there yet, but also had already happened. He realized he was no longer inside the house. Or maybe the house had turned inside out and left him behind. Either way, he was now standing on a bridge that wasn't attached to anything. It stretched out in both directions, disappearing into a sky that had too many moons and not enough stars. The bridge was made of paper. It should have been fragile, but when he stepped on it, it didn't even bend. The paper was covered in words. Some he recognized, some he didn't. Some he had never seen before but still somehow understood. One of them said his name, or at least a name that used to belong to him, and that was when he remembered. He had been walking for a very, very long time. Maybe even forever. He had never stopped, not even once, because if he did, he wasn't sure what would happen. And then, for the first time in a long time, the man who had forgotten how to stand still took a deep breath and paused. Just for a moment, just enough to feel something shift. The bridge of words tensed beneath his feet. The sky leaned closer, as if listening. And then, something knocked on the door of his mind. Knock, knock, knock. And without thinking, he stepped forward again, and the world changed. The knock was not a sound. It was a feeling, a soft pressure against the edges of his thoughts, like a memory asking for permission to be remembered. He had stepped forward. The bridge of words shivered beneath his feet, and the sky let out a quiet sigh, as if it had been holding its breath this whole time. And then the world folded itself inside out. He was no longer on the bridge, or maybe the bridge had become something else, because now he was walking through a forest made entirely of unfinished ideas. The trees were half-formed sketches, their branches curling into question marks, their leaves fluttering like pages that had lost their place. The ground beneath him was not quite solid. Every time he looked down, it changed. Sometimes it was stone, sometimes it was water, sometimes it was a collection of old sentences that no one had ever spoken aloud, and the air smelled like the moment before someone speaks but changes their mind. Somewhere in the distance, a clock was ticking irregularly, as if it couldn't quite decide which direction time was supposed to move. The man, who had forgotten how to stand still, kept walking, and the forest shifted around him, like a thought half-formed and waiting to be completed. At some point, which is to say, a point that was neither before nor after, he found a door frame standing alone among the trees. It had no walls to hold it up. It had no hinges, no handle, no keyhole. Just a frame, and beyond it, something that wasn't here, or maybe something that was waiting to arrive. A voice, quiet but certain, spoke from the other side of nothing. "Are you looking for something?" The man hesitated. Was he? Had he ever been? Before he could answer, the doorframe tilted slightly, as if waiting for him to make up his mind. So he did what he always did. He stepped through. The moment he passed through, his thoughts untied themselves like knots unraveling in water. He wasn't standing anymore, or walking, or moving in any way that made sense. Instead, He was falling sideways through a space that was too big to be inside, but too small to be outside. Words drifted past him like fish in an unseen current. He reached out to catch one, but it slipped through his fingers, dissolving into the feeling of forgetting what you were about to say. Far below him, or maybe above him, or maybe neither, there was a great city made of staircases. No buildings, no streets, just stairs. They climbed over each other in endless loops, spiraling into the sky, dipping beneath the ground, connecting to themselves in ways that made his mind ache just to look at them. People moved along them without stopping. Some walked up, some walked down, some walked sideways, stepping onto staircases that turned just before they reached the end, leading somewhere else entirely. And at the very center of it all, suspended in mid-air, was a door with 1,000 keyholes. The man, who had forgotten how to stand still, was still falling sideways, and he realized he was about to land on the stairs. The moment his feet touched the steps, the city of staircases sighed, a long, slow exhale, as if it had been waiting for him to arrive. The people didn't stop moving. No one acknowledged him. But somehow, he knew, this place was watching him. He took a step forward, and the stairs shifted beneath him, as if guiding him somewhere. He climbed, not because he wanted to, not because he knew where he was going, but because the stairs expected him to, and he had never been very good at standing still. The higher he climbed, the quieter the city became. The endless footsteps faded. The shifting staircases grew slower, more deliberate, until finally he stood before the door with 1,000 keyholes, and for the first time in a long time, he stopped. The door regarded him, not with eyes, but with awareness, like a question that hadn't been asked yet. He reached for the handle, but before he could touch it, a single knock echoed from the other side. Knock, 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 and then the door opened. The door opened too slowly, not in the way normal doors do, with hinges and creaks and the shifting of weight. No, this door unfolded itself like a sentence being spoken in reverse, each movement dissolving the moment it completed itself. And beyond it, there was nothing. Not darkness, not light, not even emptiness. Just the absence of anything that could be absent. The man, who had forgotten how to stand still, hesitated for the first time in a long time. Not because he was afraid, not because he doubted, but because for the first time there was no path in front of him, nothing to walk on, nothing to walk toward, just the idea of a place that hadn't decided if it existed yet. So he did what he always did. He stepped forward, and the moment his foot passed through the threshold, the world remembered itself. It was a street, or at least it was trying to be. The buildings were half-formed, their windows showing places that didn't match their exteriors. The sky above was a soft, unreadable color, like the word for a shade that had never been invented. Shadows moved without sources. Some of them had conversations with each other. Some of them did not belong to anything at all. The air smelled like the feeling of déjà vu, And in the middle of it all, a mirror stood alone, tall and waiting. It had no frame, no reflection, just a smooth, shifting surface, like the thought of a memory that hadn't happened yet. The man, who had forgotten how to stand still, took a step toward it, and the mirror stepped back. The realization settled in his chest like a whisper that had no words. The mirror wasn't a mirror. It was something else. Something that looked like him. Something that moved like him. But it wasn't him. It was just another version of walking forward. So he stepped again, and the mirror moved away again. And for the first time, the man wondered, what happens if I stop? So he did. He stood still, for the first time in a long time, and the mirror did not stop. It kept walking forward, and the moment it passed through him, everything folded inward. He was somewhere new again, not a street, not a city, not even a place. He was standing in a conversation between two people who weren't there. Their words drifted past him like paper boats on a quiet river. He could hear them. But the moment he tried to listen, the words unraveled into sounds that had no meaning. One of the voices laughed, the other voice sighed, and then a chair appeared in front of him, the same chair from the house made of exits, the chair he had almost sat in before, and now it was here, waiting, again. The voices faded, the air stilled. The chair was expectant. It wasn't asking, it wasn't demanding, it was simply there. So the man, who had forgotten how to stand still, sat down, and the moment he did, the world exhaled. The streets, the mirrors, the staircases, the doors, they stopped moving. Not because they were broken, not because they were gone, but because they had never been moving in the first place. He had been moving. He had been creating the path beneath his feet, simply by walking. And now, for the first time, he had stopped, and the world had stopped with him. The chair was solid beneath him. His hands rested on his knees. His breath was steady. And then something knocked inside his mind. A soft, rhythmic sound. Knock, knock, knock. And then a door opened. The door that had opened inside his mind wasn't a door at all. It had no hinges, no handle, no frame. It was simply an absence, a space where something should have been, but wasn't. And yet, it was open, waiting. So, the man, who had forgotten how to stand still, did what he had always done. He stepped forward, and immediately, he was falling. Not down, not up, not even sideways, the way he had before. This time, he was falling through the space between moments. The air around him was thick with echoes, but not echoes of sounds. Echoes of things that hadn't been said yet. A voice whispered past him, "I was just about to..." Another one followed. "What if we had taken the other road?" And another, "I should have told you." They slipped past him like fish, darting through dark water, unfinished, unspoken, unformed. He reached out to grab one, but the moment his fingers brushed against it, vanished, because it had never existed in the first place. At some point, if point still existed here, he landed, or at least, he was no longer falling. He was standing in a room without walls. The floor beneath him was solid, but it didn't feel like it belonged to anything. It was just there, the way silence is there between words. In front of him stood a table, and on the table was a single piece of paper. There were words written on it. He recognized them, because they were words he had said before. I was just about to. What if we had taken the other road? I should have told you. The unfinished echoes. They were here, waiting for him to finish them. The man, who had forgotten how to stand still, stared at the paper, and for the first time he wondered, how long have I been walking? How many places had he passed through? How many doors had he stepped through? How many moments had he left behind? For the first time in a long time, he didn't want to keep moving. He wanted to understand. So he did something he had never done before. He picked up the pen beside the paper, and he wrote. The moment his pen touched the page, the world shuddered. Not in fear, not in pain, but like a deep, endless exhale, like something settling into place after floating for too long. The air around him became still. The table became real. The floor beneath him became solid in a way it had never been before. And when he finished the sentence, everything stopped. No shifting streets, no unraveling staircases, no doors appearing just as he was about to pass through them. Just stillness, just silence, just being, and the man, who had forgotten how to stand still, finally remembered. He put down the pen. He looked up, and for the first time, he saw his own reflection standing across from him. Not in a mirror, not in a doorway, just standing there, still, waiting, not asking him to move, not expecting him to walk forward, just watching, and that was when he knew. The path had never been leading him somewhere. He had been creating it as he walked, and now, for the first time, he had arrived, and that was enough.